Okay. All right. Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming. So this is our first PA Unplugged Greenhouse. We're super excited that you chose to spend your 1 o'clock potential lunch hour with us. So thank you. So the idea for Greenhouse is really that we wanted to create a space for cultivation and, different from our weekly coalition call where we have a more focused conversation and are building ideas, community, and continuing to build the connection that we have been doing to date so far in Pennsylvania. We know that in greenhouses, especially this time of year, it's where energy builds. We can grow our advocacy, ideas take root, and hopefully we'll all continue to work side by side to bring something new to life. For those joining us for the first time, so PA Unplugged is a statewide coalition. We are around a year old, and we this has all happened very organically in the past year. And our mission is to restore real world connection, reclaim our collective attention, and champion intentional technology use to build stronger communities and drive lasting change for the next generation. So again, thank you for being here, and I will pass it over to Alex, who will introduce our guest speaker.
Thank you, Kristen. So thanks so much for being here, everyone. We are so glad to welcome Andy Liddell today. He and his wife Julie founded the EdTech Law Center and have dedicated their work to protecting young people's digital civil rights. Andy brings invaluable legal expertise on EdTech and student safety that we're so excited to dig into today. Thank you so much for sending in questions. I did share those, assuming you sent them before yesterday morning. I shared them with Andy. I still have the ones that came in after that, and I have them as part of the list. We're going to start off with Andy giving a brief intro and kind of primer on the current landscape. Again, talking about some of the progress of the past year, where things stand today, and then we'll dive into some of those questions you sent in. We're definitely hoping to leave time at the end for additional Q&A. As we're going, like we're all Brady Bunch style in here right now. Like this is not a webinar. We would appreciate if you did keep your mics muted during like the duration of the kind of like Q&A portion. The kind of like Kristen and I will be kind of going back and forth asking Andy questions that you guys sent in, but we're going to leave time at the end for you guys to come off and just shout out some questions. We definitely want to make room for that at the end. But if things are coming up that you're thinking of, questions that are coming up related to a question you see, put it in the chat and we'll try to weave it in. Please feel free to do that. We're not going to like disable the chat or anything. Um, okay, so with that, I'd like to hand it over to Andy. Thank you.
Well, Alex, Kristen, thank you so much for having me today. So very briefly, I'm Andy Liddell with the EdTech Law Center. We are a consumer protection law firm in Austin, Texas, and we solve problems where school meets technology. And so what that usually means is we're suing tech companies for the harms they cause kids in the classroom. Our lawsuits so far have come in basically two flavors. One are these data privacy class actions that take on the business model that, it's my strongly informed belief is the problem behind all of this. It's why the ed tech is not effective. It's why kids are off task. It's that these companies see school, see the public education system as a captive market to exploit, and what they're trying to do is just get information about people. And so the point is, you capture a wide network of kids, and you're just generating information, and that's how they create value. But it's not there to help kids learn or keep them safe. Um, we also have lawsuits that are more personal injury in nature, and this is where kind of the acute and felt harms of the business model manifest themselves. Where a kid goes online on their school computer, usually their parents don't even know these computers connect to the internet like they do, and something bad happens. They are connected with a stranger on the internet who then, grooms them for sex, tries to get them to send pictures, tries to find out where they live. As has happened to some of our clients. They go on their school computer and are using it to look up innocent things that whether it's things about cartoons they like or things about their changing bodies or relationships, that because of the nature of the algorithm and the internet, reveal and provide not innocent and dangerous results. And so we have kids who from a very early age have been exposed to pornography that has led to compulsive sexuality, children who've been exposed to very violent and upsetting content, frontline images of war and terrorist attacks and things. Um, And so, our view of the world is these are design defects. These are problems that that result from choices that human beings at tech companies have made that they could make differently. And we've seen this in the past throughout a long history in the United States of plaintiffs' lawyers trying to sue a better world into existence. And it's not my preferred mode, but it is, I think, what we have decided is going to be necessary in the wake of, just failed oversight and these very powerful forces that are moving in and moving into our schools and moving in on our kids. So yeah, so we are a contingency fee firm, so we don't take, we're not charged by the hour. We get paid when and if we win. And the idea behind that is that we want to be able to help everybody who needs our help. And so it's been going very well. So far, we've had some pretty big wins in the privacy space and are continuing to get more of these product defect cases on file. And so, just to start, if any of this rings a bell or sounds familiar, is manifesting in your own life or community, please reach out to us. The best way is through our website, edtech.law, and there's a contact form, and that will get you in our intake system and get our people being able to field your calls, answer questions, and figure out how we can help. And so yeah, so that's the firm, that's who we are, that's kind of the overview. Alex, was that enough, or
That's
do I need to
perfect.
keep going?
No, that's perfect. Let me dive in with
Great.
the first question we got. And you also have, of course. I'm wondering about and I'm speaking for the person. I am wondering about liability for districts that essentially give children access to pornography by giving them inappropriately supervised access to personal internet connected devices and supplying the internet at school. I would think that connecting kids with pornography qualifies as child abuse. No one at my school, at my district, either the building principal, director of tech, superintendent, school board member, seems to accept responsibility for what elementary or just general students see. I feel responsibility needs to be firmly seated in one or a few individuals so they carry that moral and ethical weight of their decisions to give this access to children. I think this would enable more effective advocacy, even if no one plans to pursue anything in court. So, would love your response to that.
Yes. So, broadly speaking, legal liability of elected officials or government officials is a very, very complicated landscape. And so, legally, that's a difficult question to answer. But the point is, there is some culpability here, and there is responsibility here, and these are things that we can look to the legal system, but that's just one element of our movement. And so, I probably should have mentioned this in my little intro, but I've been an advocate myself, an activist since May of 2019. And the thing that got me into this fight was exactly this question: was a first grade boy in our community was using his school iPad during the
Mhm.
school day and was searching for, I think he was 6 years old. And so he asked Siri for pictures of sexy girls, and porn kept coming back for weeks before the teacher knew about it. And so, you know, it was a big outcry. The parents went to the school board. There were, tons of meetings, and we were interested in this because our daughter was getting ready to start kindergarten the following year, and we didn't even know that kids this age had iPads. Um, and so went to the meeting, ended up meeting the parents. They put on a big show of listening, but then behind the scenes were retaliating against the parents. And so through trying to hook these folks up with a lawyer who could help them at the time, I became connected with Fair Play and became an activist. And so all that to say, there is a lot of culpability here around this issue. Whether there is legal liability, I don't know. It depends on your state. But these are issues that the more we understand that this is number one a design flaw because as I see it, Google, Apple, Microsoft, everybody knows these things are going into school. Everybody knows they're going in the hands of kids as young as 5. There's no reason for a 5-year-old to be on the internet just as the internet all day long. There is no that is not good for that kid. It's good for the companies, and they've tried to convince our public officials that somehow is preparing them for the future and is somehow good for them. But that's marketing. That's a narrative. That's not true. Um, and so all that to say, there could be some legal liability, but now that we know that these things actually are dangerous and are lawsuits that are going to reveal much more about how dangerous they are and help shape the public narrative. Um, it's something that you can use to run on. It is something you can use to pressure your school board members to listen to your community because this is supposed to be democracy, right? And I think democracy often starts at the school board level. And so I would just encourage people to start thinking in those lines of, you know, rather than try and hold them, accountable in court, think about holding them accountable to the community at the ballot box. And a number of my activist friends, my compadres, as I started calling them, because comrades is too divisive. So my compadres have started running for school board and winning on these issues. It's like these are galvanizing issues, and these are things that cut across partisan lines. And I mean, every possible battle line that has been drawn in our society, this issue transcends. And I think that, again, as a big believer in democracy and community, it can be really galvanizing and an opportunity to get involved. And so I would say they absolutely are responsible. The companies are the ones ultimately responsible. And now that we know that they're dangerous, school boards and school districts have a responsibility to change the policy and not to be putting dangerous things into the classroom.
Great. We have a follow-up in the chat from Roseanne. Thank you so much. Could you tell us some dollar amounts or of awards or settlements that you've obtained for clients so we can scare our school administrators with these numbers?
Well, I'll tell you what. I'll tell you one. And it's not we've not tried it yet, but you can do these jury panel things. So you can go and basically impanel a jury like a marketing survey kind of thing. And this was a case where there's a 10-year-old girl out in Bakersfield, California. And again, some states you can't sue your school district at all. You can there's no monetary award that's possible. And I don't know what the landscape is in Pennsylvania, but in California you can. And so this was a girl, 10 years old, gets her school Chromebook, and there's an esports club or whatever. And anyhow, she's able to get on Roblox, and Roblox is a platform that markets itself as safe gaming for kids. It is a notorious haven for child predators, and this was true even in 2023 when this happened. The FBI had put out a bulletin saying that Roblox was dangerous and home to these sexual predators. Interpol, all kinds of agencies from all around the world. This was not a conspiracy theory. This was, law enforcement recognizing this thing was dangerous, and that this exact thing that happened to our client could happen to kids. And so she was, connected with a stranger on Roblox, pretended to be a kid, said, "Hey, let's go over to Discord," where he began to groom her sexually, trying to find out where she lived, and tried to, all of this horrible stuff that should never happen to a 10-year-old. The parents didn't even know that the computer connected to the internet. They didn't know. They didn't know this was an internet connected device. They thought it was just for school and schoolwork. And so the dad was helping the daughter with her homework one night, and this message just started popping up, and he just was like, "What is this?" And so reported it. Saw what was going on, talked to the daughter, figured out this has been going on for over a month, um, and reported the crime to the police, and then asked if the police would report to the school as they had to. They did. But then nothing happened. The school district didn't send out any communication to the community, nothing. And so the dad went back to the school district and said, "Hey, people need to know that this could happen to their kid because I think they just have no idea that these people could have access to your children." Nothing happened. And so he went public. He went public, and he went on the local news and spoke out. And, coincidentally, and as our lawsuit against the school district in that case alleges, um, they began to retaliate against him and his family by changing his daughter's attendance records and showing that she was absent when she wasn't. And in California, truancy is a crime. So parents can go to jail for up to a year if their kid is habitually truant. They can be fined $5,000 if their kid is habitually truant. And so, and this was a victim of a sex crime. Let's not forget a 10-year-old victim of a sex crime here that we're talking about. Um, we presented these facts to a jury panel that was meant to model a California jury, and trying to settle this with the school district. And we left it pretty open ended. We anchored it. I want to say at like $10 million. Dollars. And more than half the panel came back and said that our client should get $15 million dollars or more based on this. And so that's one data point. Those awards may not be possible, but I think what should scare people even more is that that guy's no longer the superintendent of that school district. This was not something that was well received by the community, and he is no longer in that role. And so there's a lot of scary numbers out there, and there's a lot of scary lawyers out there. And I'm a guy who doesn't even want to be suing school districts. I want them as my clients because I see them as much as victim as perpetrator here. There are other law firms that that's all they do is sue school districts. And again, once they understand how this works and who's culpable, yeah, people should be concerned.
Right. Kicking it over to Kristen for the next question. Thank you so far, Andy. This is
I have to
incredible.
unmute myself. Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, question two. I wonder, can you share thoughts on the legal angle to a right to opt out of one-to-one devices and or digital homework? And
Right. So this is going to be something I'll try not say to answer every single question, but you do have rights. These rights exist. Are probably unlikely to be respected, and so just saying that at least once and maybe for 15 more times after this. And so the way that have been thinking about this is, parents under the the federal Constitution, you have all kinds of rights. Your rights come from all kinds of places. We've been trying to think about having a high impact with our work because we have to because we're very small. You're looking at a third of the lawyers in my law firm right now. So we're small and we have to be kind of punch above our weight. And so as we've been thinking about rights at school, we think about federal constitutional rights because if we get good case law there, that can percolate throughout a region where an appellate court sits or throughout possibly the entire country if we can get it before the Supreme Court. And so, under the 14th Amendment, parents have the right to direct the education and upbringing of their child. And that's not as broad as it sounds, but it still is pretty broad. It's one of the oldest substantive due process rights. It's been recognized by the Supreme Court. It's been, I'd say, on the books, but it's been recognized in presidential opinions for over 100 years. And it has protected such things as the right to learn a non-English language at school. The right to opt your child out of corporal punishment when the district has a corporal punishment policy. These things that do weigh very heavily on the parent-child relationship. The 14th Amendment tends to protect. And so, but what parents don't have a right under the 14th Amendment to do is to control the curriculum, right? And so you can't just override the democratic process essentially because curriculum adoption is democratic. It has a lot of checks and balances, and experts weigh in, the community weighs in. When it's done right, it's done in this way that is reflective of, I think, a functioning democracy. Um, and so trying to draw the line between curriculum and then other stuff, we think that there are strong 14th Amendment rights that would protect your right to opt out of the technology environment as it exists at most schools because it's interfering with your family values and your choice and your rights to raise your kids and educate them the way you want to. And so, parents have a duty to protect their children. They have a duty to keep them safe from certain things. And those parental rights can be taken away. Your custodial rights over your kid can be taken away if you are, negligently or intentionally exposing them to pornography or drugs or alcohol or firearms or people that you know to be sexual predators. If you're regularly letting your very young child watch horrific violence on television, the state can come in and they'll certainly you'll have your due process, but you can have your kid taken away from you if you're abusing them in that way. Well, what's happening at school on your school computer? When in many districts, it's wide open access to the internet where kids are viewing pornography and being connected with strangers who want to prey on them sexually or cause them to hurt themselves or others. They're viewing all this violent content. And so your obligations to your kids, not just saying your rights, but your legal obligations to your kids are being undermined by this thing that the school is forcing on them. And so that's the theory of the case. We've yet to file that case, and that's going to be a really long road. But I do think it is a credible articulation of parents' rights under the 14th Amendment. And again, that's just one way to go about this. And so that's notwithstanding legislation, that's not looking to your state or that's the Commonwealth Constitution. There's other places where your rights reside. That's just one of them. But I think fundamentally, as a parent, you can choose not to have your kid look at YouTube slop all day long. That's a choice you can make. You can try and cultivate good habits of mind. And what do we do in our free time? What do we do when we're bored? Those are very important family values questions that are being undermined in many school districts by the way that they implement their technology.
So I'm curious, Andy, what are your thoughts about, thinking about maybe like a local advocacy level, right? Parents pushing on the right to opt out. Something that a lot of parents hear is, well, the state testing is on the Chromebook. So our hands are tied. That's kind of the message that a lot of families are getting when they raise concerns about the Chromebook. What are your thoughts there?
I think that's a pretty lazy answer, but it's very common. And so I would then ask, it's like, okay, so how many days a year is the state testing? How much of that time is being spent giving kids the skills, developing the skills they need to interface, interact with the computer in order to perform the test that they need to perform. And then what about everything else? What about all this other stuff, right? And so if all we were doing, I think none of us would be here if all schools were doing was putting kids in a computer lab, teaching them how to type, teaching them how to hold their body, teaching them how to use a computer for the purpose of being able to interact with the computer for the purpose of a state test. That's not what we're doing. That's not what's happening. And so we can't just hide behind state testing while kids' ability to pay attention in school is being destroyed and they're being exposed to all of the horrors of the internet.
Do you want me to take the next one, Alex?
Yes. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, for the group here, I'm sure all of you know, and Andy, in case you don't, and this just I saw it just happen in New York too, like this week. But Pennsylvania had a meltdown last week during the state testing, and the servers didn't work, people couldn't log on, and I mean, and it was keyboards are broken. It was
Yeah.
pretty much a disaster. Kids just sitting around and then having to move it, extend the testing into other days. Um, so our hope is that maybe that's a wake-up call to at
Well,
least,
it is. These systems are so brittle.
yeah.
They're so brittle and they're not resilient. And I think that we need to be thinking about resiliency and paper is good. Paper is good. There's an audit trail with paper. When we think, I mean, I'm thinking about like voting, right?
Hmm.
Where like a lot of voting machines, they still have the paper ballot, and you still have to have that. And so, there is this, I think, very, very misguided idea that paper is old and computers are new, and paper is past and computers are future. And if you like paper, you're outmoded. But in the design world, there's this concept called affordances. And basically, it's the things that the features of an object that allow you to interact with that object. And the affordances of paper and pencil are pretty excellent. Whereas the affordances of computers can be very undermining and defeating for kids. And so one thing that I think, this active, politically engaged group can start doing is let's return state testing to something that is done on paper. And even though it's not adaptive or predictive or whatever, who cares? Because that adaptivity isn't good for the kid. That's good for the test company, right? They're getting all this extra data that they're selling. Well, who cares? We're not in this. Like state testing doesn't exist to profit the companies that make the tests, or at least it shouldn't. I fear that perhaps it has become it's become that way, but that's really not what the purpose of state testing is meant to be.
Um, Alex, do we have anything there wasn't anything in the chat
Oh,
about,
let's see.
okay.
Oh, let's ask Kirsten's
Could I,
question.
I'm
Kirsten,
sorry. Can I ask a
go ahead.
follow-up to the state testing question?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so my kids go to a Waldorf charter, so it's publicly funded Waldorf school. Up until last year, they were doing paper, and the school pushed and pushed and pushed with the state. They kept saying, "We don't want to do the computers. We don't have enough equipment." And Joey, the principal there, told me this that the state was like, "Nope, nope, 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 nope." So they're doing it on the laptops this year. But I'm wondering if, based on the meltdown and other issues, like if there's even a legal case to be brought on behalf of a school, which by charter isn't allowed to do ed tech, to challenge this insistence that they do tests on computers. Because my girls both said it was way worse. Like they couldn't answer the
Right.
questions. They were hard. It was hard to read on the screen, et cetera. Like they noticed the difference because they've been taking these on paper. And I'm just curious if after this meltdown, um, and then with all this, that they're basically forcing the school, which did not have the equipment to do them on computers, if there's a legal angle there.
Right, right. Well, and maybe I'm the world's worst plaintiff's lawyer, but I think lawsuits are usually the last resort, right? And so a lot of these things are difficult to bring in court, and this is something that, again, there might be an angle, but you'd want to get somebody who's really familiar with, Pennsylvania administrative law, which is not me. Um, but to the point, this is something where politics can make a difference. I say, like, politics in the sense of people mobilizing like you all are and raising these issues. And so this is something that you should be able to take to your elected representatives in the Commonwealth, and that this is something that should be brought up. And we've seen a lot of groups just like yours have a lot of success by just being diligent and mobilized and continuing to let their elected representatives know this is a winning electoral issue. This is something that when you respond to your community will continue to support you. And when you don't, you will draw challenge. And so I think, understanding exactly the dynamics and how, these tests are overseen and mandated and stuff, that's certainly beyond my current understanding. But with a group as big as yours, that's something you all could crowdsource and get up to speed on. And, it's likely that there are people in this network already who work in the state house or know people who do who are lobbyists who can help navigate that process. But this is a great opportunity to show how brittle this system is, and that, like, it failed for no good reason, and in a way that if this was just on pen and paper, it would not have failed. We could have done the state testing the way that it was required, and more to the point, doing pencil and paper is better for kids. I'm sure many of you, and you maybe have already featured him or met him, but Jared Cooney Horvath, um, he dissects the OECD data and kind of shows the artifacts of when they transitioned from pencil and paper to computers, there was a drop show that basically reflected kids not being familiar with computers, and that, like, that was an interface problem. It wasn't a knowledge problem, but that they found it too hard to use, which affected their scores. And so we should be eliminating those barriers to kids. And again, just not just falling for the industry narrative of, oh, well, adaptive is better, online is better. It just isn't.
Awesome. Thank you, Sarah. I like this of spotlighting people and having them ask questions. If that's okay, let's keep doing that. Kirsten, can we have you ask your question to Andy?
Sure. Hi, Andy. Thank you so much for being here.
Hi, Chris.
So I have a meeting next week with some senior administrators at my school district. We're the third largest in the state. So assistant superintendents, head of curriculum, head of technology. I sent them four simple questions, much of which I like pulled from your amazing website. So thank you. But just like, what does my kid have access to? How often are they using it? All of those good things. Not using words like consent or anything that's going to freak anybody out, but trying to kind of get my hands around it. I've got a decent working relationship with most of these individuals, but I'm cautiously optimistic that they took my meeting. And I'm curious from conversations you've had, um, any red flags that I or we, I know others are doing the same thing, should be looking out for that might be signals they're assuaging my concerns by hosting a meeting, but they're really not going to work with me, or just any signals that I should be looking out for that say, eeks, this is heading in a bad direction. That's not like the
Um,
obvious.
Yeah, yeah. No, I mean, I think a lot of it, sort of what I've seen is a tendency to isolate. And basically, like, if you have a problem, it is your personal problem. It is not a community problem, right? And so any signals of, oh, keep this between us, or don't share this widely, that can be a signal that they're not really serious. If I mean, obviously, if they get hostile, but you know and a lot of times people do get defensive, and so um, I think though that I think you're right to be wary of this conversation. And so see what they'll commit to. Just kind of keep pushing. Would you commit to a public forum? Would you commit to, I know a lot of other parents have these questions. Would you commit to basically more transparency, more disclosure? Could we have a full list of the programs that our kids have access to? Which, duh, you already should have that. Like you should already have that if you're going to be consenting. But just taking it slow and in a step-by-step fashion. What do our kids have access to? What are they doing with it? Do you have the research to support that this is good? Um, and just keep asking those questions. And in my experience, things tend to come to a head pretty quickly, and you should be, th- they haven't been subtle. And so, a lot has changed in the 7 years that I've been doing this. I think, 2026 is a watershed. This year is totally different than every other year I've been doing this. I mean, I had my tinfoil hat on for the first 3 years of doing this, and then I was being politely ignored for the next 3 years. And then now, like, things are actually happening. Things are really changing. And so helping schools understand that, like, this isn't reactionary. It's not coming from a place of fear. It's not coming from a place of ignorance or nostalgia. This is coming from people who know a lot more about these products than the average person does, and that they are dangerous, that they undermine learning, they're developmentally inappropriate, that they undermine community, they undermine so many of the things that we send our kids to school to do. These things are interfering with. And it's going to be reflective of a leader who looks at this and decides a different way forward.
Thank you. All right, Allison, I see your hand is up. I'm gonna add you to the spotlight so you can ask Andy your follow-up.
Thank you. And thank you, Andy, so much for being here. Kind of like Kirsten, so my school board now knows me by my first name. We've been to multiple school board meetings. They know my situation. They know our concerns. It's a very similar situation where they think it's a personal concern. So I've had access to my third grader's device on a snow day, and I went down a rabbit hole, and I was shocked at all the things, of course, that I was able to do on a third grader's device. And I imagine that my kindergartner's device can do the same thing. So we're over at Colonial School District in Eastern Pennsylvania, and I have all the information that Kirsten's seeking. So I know what device, I know what tools. We went to the curriculum school board meeting. They were very forthcoming with the information. I know what apps they use. We have time. We were given time blocks, like K through 5 is 45 minutes a day, 6 to 12 is 2 to 3 hours a day. So I have all of that information. I think where my concern now lies is I don't believe that it's true. So so I actually have, that's my first question. So I'll let you answer that first. I do have another question about fingerprinting that I want to ask you too. But what is your feedback? Because similarly, I just don't, and I actually received an email, Alex, I haven't filled you in. They've requested a meeting with us next week. So my superintendent and our head of curriculum has requested a meeting with us. So that's great. But again, I'm very weary of, in our school district, I just found out our sixth graders, I imagine it's 6 through 12, have to use their devices to request to go to the bathroom. So if their argument is that these devices are only being used 2 to 3 hours a day, well, what happens if my kid has to go to the bathroom when the device isn't out on the desk? No, that can't be true. The device has to be out on the desk. If she's asking, and this came from a sixth grader's mouth. So my first question to you is, if we don't find that the information is accurate, like we keep requesting, our biggest thing is we would love an advisory council. We keep asking for that. Is there anything else that we can ask for?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that there are ways to do reports, and I've got huge reservations. I'm not recommending any of these, surveillance products because I think they're pernicious in their own way. But a lot of districts do have these, so-called safety products like GoGuardian or Lightspeed or whatever that, basically log all the traffic, and they should be able to generate time reports about how much time a kid is spending on their device and what they're doing on it, if that does exist. But you're right to be skeptical, and they likely won't give you that information. And so, and again, I think that the idea of surveilling children and their thoughts all day long is really bad for them. It's undemocratic. It's developmentally inappropriate. There's a lot of things that's really concerning about that. And so, but it's like, okay, you say this is true, but what's the evidence for what you're saying? And then, around the issue of the digital hall pass, I mean, that's outrageous. Like that's so unnecessary and so invade. Like, what are we doing here? Why is this necessary? Are you saying that like kids, we couldn't figure out how to let kids go to the bathroom before we had computers in school? That's insanity. Um, and so again, I mean, these are opportunities, and I think that you know, well, one thing I've been working in this movement, like I said, for quite a long time, um, and one thing that I've heard a lot, and I see it reflected here, is that this is mostly a movement of moms and women, and a lot of people are like, oh, I'm just a mom. I'm just, it's like, well, first of all, no one's just anything, and I would encourage people to think about yourself as a future school board member, as somebody who can run, who thought never sought this out, never wanted this. I don't want to be doing this job. I don't want to be here. Frankly, it's like I'm happy to be doing it, but I want to live in a world where my job doesn't exist because we won. But we were called to this work. I feel like we were very much put in a position where we were given a call that we had to take up and answer. And so, in a similar way, nobody wants to run for school board, really. But it's important. It's an important thing to do, and this is an opportunity to do that. And so, push back against all of this, the digital hall pass, you know, the falsehoods around how much time kids are spending. Ask them to show the evidence, and if they can't show the evidence, ask why not, and just keep pushing until they answer your question or until they give up.
Thank you. I'm going to keep pushing. My follow-up question is, so I know that I consented to this, but I just hadn't put much thought into it, that we moved to a fingerprinting system for school lunch purchasing
Okay.
this year as a school district. And I remember it coming through again. I just didn't, there's so many things, right? One kit, all of that stuff. And the more I'm talking to people about it, the more I'm realizing, like, I'm asking neighboring school districts what they do. A lot of kids have like an ID code, they'll put in a 4-digit number, whatever that may be, and that's how they pay for lunch. I see problems in fingerprinting, but have you come across, um, like, is there data, or is there something that I can, when we do bring this, when we come to the meeting with them, go to the meeting with them, is there, are there lawsuits? Is there data breaches? Are there things that I just haven't been able to find with regard to fingerprinting a kindergartner for their lunch?
So I've not seen. I mean, this is a new one for. I mean,
Okay.
I didn't realize this is happening either. Um, So no, I've not heard of this, but it is a risk, right? I mean, it is a risk. It's biometric information about a child that is persistent, and we do know that ed tech companies traditionally are very ripe targets for hackers because they well, they're kind of the B team at best of the tech world, right? And so, again, most kids don't go to college thinking I really want to be a developer at an ed tech company. You kind of wind up at an ed tech company, and so they don't have the resources. They don't usually have the ability to do this really right or safely, and they often don't. And so, when they are invariably breached, this information gets out. And so, I think raising the point of is there really not a better way to let kindergartners pay for their lunch besides giving up this very valuable biometric data that we don't even know where it's going, and we know that it could risk their future identity if it gets exposed. Yeah, again, what are we doing here?
Thank you.
Thank you,
I
Allison.
agree.
Great.
Thank you.
Just
That's why I'm
very-
here.
Yeah.
Thank you for asking.
Erin,
I'm going to have Kristen ask a question that I know a
oh,
couple people wrote in about, specifically IEP 504. So I'm just going to add her here.
okay. Really quickly though, Erin and Timothy, I know you guys had your hands up. Was it connected to what we were already talking about? Okay, so Erin, you can go. I don't want
Okay.
to, if there's like a,
Yeah,
Oh,
like
yeah.
a thread.
They bring you in. Bringing you in.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of us are in a similar situation to Allison and Kirsten where we've developed these relationships with the school and they're throwing us a bone. Like our group in Westchester has a monthly meeting with our tech department. So kind of two parts. I think you have a lot more experience with the schools than we do, like deeper experience. who's really the decision maker that gets to make the decisions? Because I feel like we've been given a guy who's been thrown to us, thrown to the wolves, and he's doing his best, but I don't actually think he can make a change in policy.
Yeah. So usually it's the superintendent. I mean, the buck stops with them, right? And so the school board, I mean, usually speaking, their job is to hire and supervise the superintendent, and then the superintendent's job is to hire everybody else and supervise everything else. And so, in my experience, superintendents are usually the biggest logjam, the biggest problem, the most hostile, the most defensive, the most all in on tech. I think that's a function of a lot of things that we don't have time to get into right now, but they do seem to exhibit a pretty similar psychology and behavior just across time and geography. And so they're the person that's responsible ultimately for this, and they could change, but they're accountable to the school board. And so, ultimately, it's the school
Mhm.
board that really sets this policy.
And just one quick follow-up on that, which is just like, I think a lot of us, we really want to partner with the schools. I mean, like you said, I never thought that I would be this suspicious and critical toward my school district as like I'm a public school graduate. Like I never thought I'd be Googling private schools all the time
Yeah.
to see what their tech policies are. Like this is just not who I thought I was. Um, so we're trying so hard to represent ourselves as partners to these schools, but I wonder, like, should we be doing that? Should we be presenting ourselves as, voters more than partners?
I when talking politics with my kids, it's like it's not a team sport. You're not cheering on the people that you like the most. You are trying to pick the person that you want across the table from you, right? So I think all politics should be adversarial, and so I think that's actually practicing politics well, which is these are what we want, and you're accountable to us and give us what we want. We're going to find somebody who will. And so I think, I mean, I get the idea of partnership, and I think that sounds good, and that's much, I mean, that's your human instinct, right? That's how people are inclined as generally sociable, upstanding members of their community. But I found that there are all these other hidden forces in the room that you don't even get to see, and that's money, and that's tech, and that's incentive payments, and that's conferences, and that's all the psychological stuff that superintendents all seem to be afflicted with in terms of they all want to be Steve Jobs, but somehow they are running a school district instead, and so they feel insecure about that. Um, so, I think it's okay to be adversarial. It's like these we're not asking you for this stuff. It's like you're accountable to us as voters, as citizens. We want to be good partners here, but if you're not going to be that partner, we're going to find that partner.
Thank you, Erin. All right, I know we have some raised hands. Kristen, do you want to slip that question in there just to make sure we get to it, and then we can
Yeah,
go?
there's two big
Okay.
topics still. Tim, Dean, please like just hold your question. If you don't mind. We
And
will
also,
we'll have time.
I can stick around. I know that you all may have to go, but I can stick around for another 15 minutes
Yeah,
past
that'd
time
be
if that's
great.
going to be
Great. Oh,
helpful.
that would be awesome. If
Thank
folks
Okay,
you.
have
yeah,
time.
I don't want to
I
cut this
can
short.
too.
This is a
Okay.
great call. So,
Thank you.
yeah, I want to make sure that everyone gets heard and we're not rushing through anything. So, yeah, no time pressure on my end for at least the next little while.
Okay. Yeah.
Thank
So Timothy and Dean, just hold your thought because we will come back to it. But we do want to talk about parents with kids with ADHD or kids that have an IEP and 504 and what those rights look like and the right to request that the district remove or keep them away from distracting apps such as YouTube and internet browsers. Um, so that's the first part of the question. And just also, studies of the impact EdTech is having on student population with IEPs and 504s.
Okay, so that's the studies question.
Or legal cases that you're
Yeah,
potentially
yeah.
working on.
So, I would just say to that, watch the space. And if you have a child who has an ADHD diagnosis or an IEP and their school issue device is making it worse, please reach out. The very first thing you'll see on our website is the form you need to fill out because we are working this out. And so, from a legal standpoint, from a practical, I need results now because lawsuits take many years, and my kid is growing every day. Yeah, so absolutely, absolutely, 504 IEP plans should account for this. If you think about ADHD, it's an attention issue, and if you think about how the internet works and how companies like Google make their money, it is by profiting off of your attention. They direct your attention to where it makes the money. And so, a lot of times, and again, I'm not a doctor and I don't work directly with kids like this, but I understand that one of the interventions that is often prescribed is changing your environment, changing your physical environment to make the undesired behavior impossible, right? And so thinking about a kid with ADHD who wants to go on the computer all the time, well, if the computer is not there, then he can't go on the computer, right? It sounds kind of obvious and silly, but it's that sort of thing, right? And so that should be available to a child. Whether it will be is a different story. Whether your district understands this and understands that, what the child experiences as distraction, Google experiences as profit because the kid is online, they're bouncing around, they're on YouTube. That's good for Google. That's not good for the kid. Um, and that this isn't a matter of willpower or good behavior or being internet awesome, as Google puts it. This is about, you wouldn't put a bottle of whiskey and lock an alcoholic in the room and say, don't drink it, right? It's like you would take steps to prevent that person from being in contact with this thing. And so, 15% of kids in school roughly have attention deficit issues. This is a big population that we need to account for. And it's not a matter of, them doing it wrong or a personal failing, a moral failing, a failure of control. It is something in their nature, in their biology that they can't control, and it's not up to them. It's like the kid with the peanut allergy or anything else. It's like you can't just say, we'll really think hard about not, going into anaphylaxis. No, this is just how your body reacts to these things, and so you should be able to get accommodations in this way, whether you will yet, because the popular understanding of these issues has not yet risen to an appropriate level. I can't say. But there are, again, this is not the work that my law firm does, but there are education lawyers who specialize in exactly these services of helping with IEP plans and 504 plans. And, I've been speaking this week with several different child psychiatrists, child psychologists, and it is very commonly understood in their line of work that the internet makes behavior issues worse because of the way that it's designed. And so that's something that your provider should be able to help with in clarifying that this is an intervention that can actually have massively positive effects on this child with an attention issue or autism spectrum disorder.
Thank you. All right. So we'll go to Timothy, we'll go to Dean. I know Alaire and Olivia have questions in the chat. Let's try to do those and then we'll let Andy go. Thank you so much for spending some extra time with us.
Oh, that's my pleasure. I told you this is my favorite part of the job, so I'm
Okay, amazing. All right. Go
Uh,
ahead.
I had a follow up to what Allison said before. And this is actually what brought me to this group and just the whole trying to address the digital one-to-one program, which is what I was told. It's not a policy. If it were a policy, the school board would have had to have a meeting and there would have been a public forum and they would have voted on it. So this is just a program, which I think is like a little bit of a loophole to avoid actually getting people together to discuss it. But the fingerprinting thing happened 4 years ago for us. So I actually kind of find it interesting that 4 years ago, this was implemented in our school, and now it's entering some other schools in our state. Like, if it's not a standardized thing for school lunches across the entire state, who is deciding on, hey, I found this cool new technology. Why don't we use fingerprints to buy lunch? I don't remember consenting. So, Allison, I was actually curious about how you consented. Was it written, verbal, both? Just in terms of, like a legal trail. And I did have a comment too about the board meetings. I've been to 3 board meetings and 2 meetings with assistant superintendent, director of curriculum, and the EdTech director. And basically, they've been kind of like very nice and warm. And we want this to be a collaborative environment. We don't want this to be, a fight necessarily. But the best of it was that they took the iPads away from indoor recess and they stopped using them as a behavioral reward, which all seemed ridiculous because, it's great, but, subsequently after those 2 meetings, the 3rd board meeting, the tech department put a presentation on for 20 minutes and present it to the board about all the benefits and all the great things about so and the local paper has been following it, and the title of the article was that the parents can control the use of the iPad when they're home after hours. And it's like, I don't even want it at my house. So,
Right, exactly.
I don't care. It's like, oh yeah, I can control the safety of the gun when they're home playing with it. Like, who cares really? So I found the school board meetings to be a little bit weird, and not really sure. Maybe you guys can kind of give me a little bit of insight. But like, if I don't have the time or energy to become a board member, how do we interact with the board? And then what is the process that they take in order to address this with the superintendent? Like, do they have to go? We would like to put a motion forth to address the iPad program. Like, what is the actual process so that I can get a framework on how to influence that or connect with people? Can I email the board members directly? Can I approach them in the community? I just don't know about the proper protocol. So thank you. Sorry, that was a little bit long, but thank you.
No, that's great. That's great. Yeah. And so, I think again, being in Texas, not being in Pennsylvania, every state is different, every school district is different. But broadly speaking, they'll have published policies around how meetings go, how policies get introduced. I think from a practical standpoint, this whole movement, all of this is about strength in numbers, and it's about coalition building, right? And so, if you personally don't have time to be a board member, and most of us don't, we'll continue to build your coalition of parents, and maybe somebody in there will, and that spreads your time among more people who can work, and it also shows strength in numbers at the board meetings. And so a lot of this, unfortunately, as we watch our kids get older and older by the day, is the work of years, not months or weeks. And maybe, things have changed. I mean, as of this year, things have changed. But I mean, I got started when my daughter was like not even in kindergarten yet, and now she's going into middle school, and we've not seen the change that I wanted to see. And so it is time consuming, but it's worth it. And I think trying to resolve yourself that this is something that is worth a much longer fight, and also that you can't do it by yourself. And so building that larger community and making it clear this is a community issue is going to be really important to your success. And then, yeah, getting relationships with these school board members, trying to take them out. I think I saw somebody in the chat say take them out to coffee. Trying to be collaborative, trying to help them understand, because a lot of times they don't understand the actual facts on the ground, and helping them see, like, again, if you want to truly be a leader and truly be innovative, the future is not going to look like handing the classroom over to the biggest Silicon Valley companies that the world has ever known. It's going to look a lot more like teachers who are respected and empowered and supported, in an environment, a physical environment that supports learning and is not one that is just a captive market for attention mining.
Thank you very much. Dean, do you want to go ahead?
Hi, Andrew. Thanks a lot for coming here with us. Appreciate it a lot. Just in light of that last comment about the political change that's going on and finally hitting in 26, I think it also. I have a question, but I want to make this comment first. The comment is we should be a little bit understanding of the boards and the school administrators and the teachers. I mean, it wasn't long ago that putting more tech in, people were getting praised for it, right?
Yeah.
It was a good thing. It was the innovative thing. It was progressive, right? And especially during COVID, it was the lifeboat, right? So even before COVID and then after that, crisis passed, there there are some compelling good uses for tech. I'm a retired teacher and I used some tech stuff in math classes that was pretty cool. It was a way to get kids to visualize stuff. It wasn't all day, every day. It was like 20 minutes once a week or something, which is the right amount.
Right about.
But what I'm saying is that making that available to kids was something that school boards got praised for until
Sure.
very recently, or even maybe some still now. So we got to be a little patient to let this change, come into play. But that's not my question. That was just a chance to get on my soapbox. But the question is specifically legally in our district. There's a big movement to opt out of one-to-one devices in elementary school. And hundreds of parents have signed a petition pushing hard on this. The board has a policy allowing opting out that was put into place 15 years ago when they first introduced a few devices, and they never thought anybody would really opt out except maybe one or two kooks. Now they got 500 very sophisticated parents demanding to opt out, and they're going to change the policy. I mean, there's a meeting set, well, it's not inevitable, but they're clearly intending to remove the option to opt out.
Is this Lower Merion?
It is indeed, yeah.
Okay.
So you know it well. All right. So is there a legal case, to go if they deny the right to opt out? And some parents are saying they're going to opt out anyway. They don't care if there's a
Yeah.
policy. Where do we all stand legally, or where does that group of parents stand? Is there a class action? Is there just individuals? So what's the legal environment?
So this goes back to kind of the 14th Amendment stuff I was talking about earlier. Exactly that. And so, there's a lawsuit. There's a lawsuit waiting to happen, basically. And so, again, contrasting parents' rights and parents' obligations to keep them safe and parents' rights to control their home environment, and showing how the school is interfering with that, again, with the implementation of this specific program, right? It's like the case isn't all computers are an infringement on parent rights, right? Like that's not the case.
Right.
It's very, very specific. It's, these computers are connected to the internet and they're not controlled well enough, and they are exposing children to harm, and they are undermining parents, decisions around child rearing in these very, very specific ways. That is the infringement, right? And so it would be, again, a very targeted, detailed lawsuit, but no, they do face legal risk by doing that. And I think, there are firms that are going to be willing to take that case, potentially. And
You know of any around that might be?
I can maybe recommend one.
Right.
And so, but again, it's like this wouldn't be something that I would be, I don't want to be glib. Like I'm very reluctant to sue public schools, but it doesn't mean that I won't. It just means that, I wish they would listen to their community, because right now they're caught between big tech and their community, and they're so often falling on the side of tech when they really should be falling on the side of their community. And I think, in this school district or any other, if I think the appropriate thing to do would be to say, look, we understand, we hear you. Let's plan for this. Let's figure this out. And so if there is a critical mass of families who don't want technology for their kids, then we're going to have a low-tech magnet school elementary program, or we're going to guarantee that every family that wants to have low-tech or no-tech for their kids in elementary school can go into a class where that's possible. That makes it easier for teachers to plan. They're not trying to accommodate one-offs and these opt-outs. There's
Right.
ways this can be done in a respectful and collaborative way that, I think should be tried, and I would much prefer to see before we get to a lawsuit.
Right.
But it's not going to stop me from, or someone from, filing a lawsuit when the facts dictate, because it is urgent, and kids are growing up every day, and this is something that can have an immediate effect. I mean, there are clients that I've worked with, they didn't have the Chromebook in their house for a month before something horrible happened. I mean, we got our first death case yesterday, where a kid was exposed to one of these online challenges of, like hanging yourself, and he did. Basically, it's a blackout challenge, they call it. And kid never had access to the internet or a device before, and saw this online and died. And so the stakes are really real here, and it's really urgent. And so I want the school board, and school leadership to appreciate that. There are really good ways through this, short of a lawsuit, but lawsuits have also been shown to make really good change in society too.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Dean. All right, Olivia, I'm going to come to you to ask the question you put in the chat earlier, if you're still on. Otherwise,
I'm
I'll
here.
ask. Oh, great.
Can
Okay.
you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Um, can I just make a tiny comment
Please.
to something that you just said, Andy? I did attend, I can't remember who was telling us this, but there was a new idea I was exposed to recently, which was that, legislators, like sometimes they're not legislating everything and they wait to see that there's all these lawsuits. Then they say, oh, we need to actually address this with legislation. This is a problem. So like I always felt like, oh, lawsuits are so adversarial. And of course I don't want to sue my district. But it was like a kind of a paradigm shift for me, realizing that that's kind of how things work sometimes to raise the issue to the level of the awareness of state legislators per se. But anyway, I know that's neither here nor there. That was just something I thought was very interesting
Very important
recently.
insight, though. It's a really great insight. And I don't want to derail your question, but I mean, there is a pattern. We've been here before, and Julie and I like patterned our practice off of historical practices. And so, if you look at the auto industry, which I think is probably the best analog to big tech we currently have, is this new thing comes along. It does have all these great advantages. It really does allow for, I mean, there's not horse crap in the streets anymore, and people can get around, and there are all these advantages. People are dying. People are dying because of the way these things are designed. And the industry says, no, no, you're driving wrong. It's inherently dangerous. The trade-offs are worth it. It's great. And there's no way we could make these things safer. Meanwhile, they've got all of their own internal research showing, of course, we can make it safer, but it's expensive and we don't want to do that. But they resist that, resist regulation, suppress it. And then lawsuits start piling up as information comes out. And where they were, denying regulation before, now they're begging for it because it's certainty, right? And so if you think about the five-star safety standards, all of that, National Highway Transportation Safety Administration came out because of plaintiffs' lawsuits against car companies, because they decided that actually we do need a design standard and we do need to be able to say if we design it to this level, and it's, third parties, experts view it to be safe, and it is safe, then our liability is limited. And that's where I want to be heading with tech. I'm not against technology. I want it to be designed and aligned with what humans need to keep kids safe and help them learn. Right now, we're in the, cars are always going to be dangerous, and if you die, too bad phase of this. And it sucks, but that's where we are. So anyway, now to your question.
Okay, yes, to my question. I was also recently exposed to this idea. I think this was from like a nationwide call. Someone shared that tech companies, I guess, maybe in some of these lawsuits, have started kind of trying to throw school districts under the bus for the fact that they're saying, well, when the privacy rights of these students are kind of being overrun, or like, any harms are coming from their product, that, well, it was in fact the school district who consented on behalf of the parent. And so it's not my fault and my product's fault. It's really your school district's fault. And that perhaps there is a way to kind of like gather that, go from that angle and educate the districts and the board that like tech companies are kind of really trying to throw them under the liability bus to save their own liability. Is that something that seems like it is happening to you, or you've heard of happening, and or something realistic that may be coming for advocates to educate their districts about? Or does that have a basis in reality?
That is the most likely outcome. And so we've seen this. We started to see kind of rumblings of this in our different cases. And so, yeah, we plainly want to force the issue. That's make these companies choose and make them throw their own customers under the bus. Like, how is that going to feel? It's like, oh, here we are, 21st century skills. We're partners in innovation. But then, oh man, when it hits the fan, that's on you guys, school, public school. They're getting them coming and going, right? It's like they're already extracting all this value from the community, taking money away from teachers and into technology, going to Silicon Valley. And then, oh yeah, by the way, when somebody gets hurt, that's also on you, school. We're not going to be there, and we're going to ask you to pay our bills. And so I think that is coming, and I think people are naive to assume that it wouldn't be.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Alaire, are you still on?
I am.
Okay, amazing. I want to have you ask your question because I am aware that the media is really picking up on this. I think it's a very good perspective.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you so much also, Andy, for sharing this time with us. I know everyone's time is super spread thin and valuable these days. I asked my question in the chat, and then about 10 minutes later, I got a text message from a media outlet. So I'm wondering what you would advise local advocates to keep in mind when speaking with media. And I want to color this with the fact that we do want to work in collaboration with our districts. We don't want to um, like rile anyone up or create unnecessary um, anxiety or tension. At the same time, drawing a hard line that we are not going away and we have very valid concerns. I like that Dean spoke earlier about Lower Merion. I know that they've gotten a huge attention recently. But I also know that maybe they would have liked to avoid that and have things work a little more smoothly before it got to that point. So are there like a real like quick and short bullet points you can give us for like, hey, do this, don't do this, be cognizant of this when you are speaking with outlets to keep everyone in a safe zone of like collaboration and nothing is going to come back to bite anyone. Does that make sense?
Yes, yeah, yeah. So I think, um, to the earlier points, and this is my perspective as well, school district leadership are making bad decisions right now. They're not doing the right thing. I don't think they're bad people, for the most part. I think they're well intended. I think they're misinformed a lot of times, or they're constrained by these other issues. And so we ask our schools in this country to do a lot and to solve a lot of social problems that they're not equipped to solve. And so, we are very empathetic and sympathetic to this, and to the idea that, the world is online now and kids need to learn how to do that. Um, right now, the way this is being done is hurting kids, and not only are they getting hurt, they're not learning the skills they need to even interact with a computer safely, how to hold their body, so they don't get neck problems or wrist problems, or myopia. How to, and starting with that, and then moving even more deeply into how to access the internet and how to avoid getting harmed or taken advantage of. And so, we're asking our school leadership to make a choice to choose your community over big tech. They see kids as eyeballs, and they see our community as a market. And we see this as our community, as our children, as our future. That's corny as hell, but like it's how I believe this. I really believe that. And education is a public good, and it's not just a market to be exploited. It is the foundation of democracy, and we've viewed that way in this country for 250 years. And so, trying to make the point that these companies have come in and extracted so much value and life from this very important, I mean, a pillar of our society, of our democracy, just all in the name of getting more eyeballs on YouTube during the weekday, for example. Um, so, yeah, but I think emphasizing the need to collaborate, emphasizing the fact, signaling to the school board that this is strongly felt and broadly felt in the community. And, in Texas, every election is a partisan election. I don't know if that's true everywhere, but the idea that this really transcends partisan politics and that there is a new coalition that's forming around these issues that is very powerful and is something that, is a winning issue or a losing issue if you do it wrong. Is all things to think about. But always, and you're not going to do this, I can already tell, but stay away from name calling, stay away from, unfounded accusations of corruption, things like that, even though those might actually be founded. This was, kind of end on this story. I mean, I've done this work forever, and people who I'm familiar with that are always like, oh, they just like paying these people off, they're just paying them to adopt this ed tech. And I've always said, no, no way, no. It's like there's all these structural reasons, there's all of these problems that we're trying to solve, and people are well intended, they're making bad choices. Well, turns out LAUSD, someone who was just indicted, now not convicted, but at least indicted on pretty strong evidence of having taken a $3 million bribe to approve a $22 million contract. And the FBI did just raid the office and homes of the superintendent, on apparently, we don't know, but around another ed tech purchase and product. And so it may well be that this is as corrupt as it seems, and it may well, and it needs more oversight. But I think try and stick to the facts, try not speculate, try and be credible, try and be a coalition builder. That's what this is. And I think, you know, don't refuse cooperation from anybody. Um, and that's, a hard I don't know. We've kind of that muscle's atrophied in our society, but like this is an opportunity to do like lowercase d democracy, lowercase p politics of just working in your community to achieve something that benefits your community.
Thank you. Okay.
Andy for all our school boards.
Thank
I
you
know.
so much.
Not me, I'm not running. Please.
Wait,
I couldn't
Andy,
help
did
myself.
you run for your school board? Did you ever end up doing it? Or
Well,
are you?
my kids are in private school because of these issues. So my daughter Jane ended up COVID happened. So this was 2019 that we are doing this. Well, COVID happened the next year, and my school district, Austin ISD, was giving kindergartners an iPad. And so as a lifelong public school kid and supporter of public schools, we wound up in this private school that again did it very safely, was did everything right, but we're able to meet in person during kindergarten because we knew developmentally how important that was for our daughter. And ended up loving the school. I'm now on the board of our kids' private school. And so our school is doing everything right. And I want our little private school to be the model for education around the world for how this is actually supposed to be done. And so this is a problem I'm very fortunate not to have to experience firsthand. But my school, there's not, I mean, this is not a fancy private school. This is an old private school that barely breaks even every year, but it's run very leanly. The administrator used to be a teacher, and she's an educator. And there's not a lot of administrative overhead, and everybody's incentives are aligned together. And I think that, my hope is that Kirby Hall School can be a model for the entire world of what community-based schooling can look like. And so, yes, I did not run for our school board. If asked, I will decline.
That's
At
okay. I
least
was just curious.
at least for the near future.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But
I think also too, I mean, thank you so much for just there were so many amazing things that you said that just really resonated, I know, with everybody here. For the larger group, and so many of you do join us weekly, so just always, I feel so honored to be amongst everybody that is on this call today and knowing that you're all doing great work in your communities across PA. I will say like this, we want these changes so fast because our kids are here now and we want to do it. I think it's important, like in the spirit of the collaboration and working with your school board or administration, the teachers, the principals. The small changes do have really big impact though. And it's like even if it's just you're able like Tim, you were talking about like it's not an indoor recess, it's not used as a reward. Those are like smaller things that are changing, but it actually does really matter to so many people. And like just not like our district doesn't bring devices home K through 4. It's not on the buses, which is huge. Like that has a huge impact on everybody. It's not at the after school programs. That has a huge impact. Our local YMCA was like, this has been amazing. Thank you so much. And that's something that our group advocated for, and the district, was open to doing. So even if the work and the success is in small bites, it still really does matter. Even though I know we all want it to be everything we want tomorrow. Um, I am gonna link the EdTech survey that we have as well as the dashboard so you can see where your district is. And if you want to get your numbers up, do it. You're able to PDF your results. It's a great document to take to meetings with school administrators and school board directors. And then also our advocacy chooser and adventure guide. If you're really new to this and you don't know where to start, we put this together to try to help you just even start somewhere because it can be really overwhelming. So hopefully, we're always open to feedback on that as well too, because it's not like done yet, but it's in a place where you can work with it and it gives you your own personalized roadmap. Um, so anyways, thank you so much, Andy.
Andy, thank you so much for sharing time with us today. This is amazing.
Well, it was my pleasure, and I'm just so admiring of the community you all have built, and and this is something that like this at my advocacy gave me my whole career. Like it opened this door to me and to Julie, and so I would just encourage you all to continue to stay active and solid and, try and find opportunities to meet up, stay engaged. This is one part of a much bigger fight, frankly, against forces of dehumanization. And so there's a lot of work to be done and just kind of digging in for the long haul and knowing that, we're not going to achieve every single thing we want tomorrow, but if we stay together, work together, don't give up, we will get pretty close to what we want sooner than we think. And so it's a worthy thing you all are doing, and just stick with it. Stick with it, and you know no one ever thinks they're going to be the person to do the thing. That's always somebody else's job. But I think think of yourselves as future school board members or future state representatives or future congressional candidates, because you are. It's like you're building a community and you're building a coalition, and this is where power lies. And so keep it up. Keep it up. It's so encouraging to meet with groups like this and like yours. And so we're here as a resource. I'm always happy to come and chat to the extent these are helpful. And so, no, I love what you're doing, and thank you all.
Thank you. Everybody have a great day. We will send the recording out to the whole Google group for anyone who wasn't here. Thank you so much, everybody. Bye.
Bye, y'all. Take care.